Okay, everybody, Paul here. Hair check. We are going to talk about instincts today. And we're going to go for a little walk around somewhere. We're going to talk about instincts. We're going to talk about the dopamine. We talked about instincts in the 12 and 12, but they didn't know anything about dopamine. They knew nothing about acetone. Acetone is talked about in step one. I'm going to talk about step one more in detail. But the instincts, it's interesting. Why does the addict's brain get addicted? And if you watch videos on Nora Volkow, you'll find that, she tells us that we have God-given instincts. And why do we use those instincts? Well, we use those instincts because God instilled in us or created in us a dopamine reward system. Okay? So all the instincts that are given to us just to survive as a species and survive as individuals we're rewarded when we use those instincts. Obviously, food tastes good, so we can live. Sleep is nice. I love sleep. Dopamine. Talking to each other and helping each other, social instincts. We get a little of that when we go to AA meetings in the beginning where we have no dopamine left because of drugs and alcohol. We'll get to that in a minute. We go into a meeting, you get a little bit of dopamine, start to feel a little bit normal, Sex instincts. Sex is great. Love how sex feels, as long as you don't go too far with it, just like food and gluttony or anything, right? Social pride, right? False pride. So we have three sets of instincts: sex, social, and security. We're rewarded when we use those instincts. It's called the dopamine reward system. It's obvious that God put it created that in us. And all animals like food. All animals like sex. Most animals are social creatures. A lot of them are, not whales. And but they are at certain times of the year. We need each other. We need each other to survive. So there's a thrill. There's a good feeling. There's a dopamine spike when we get together and help each other. If I climb a tree to get a coconut, or if I run a mile to catch something and eat it, I feel good. You ever feel good, like that dopamine high or that endorphin high or that serotonin high? I go for a good walk and feel good. It's all God-given. It's all so we can survive as an individual and species, right? Without sex, we'd never procreate. It's got to feel good or we wouldn't do it. If we didn't do it, we wouldn't be a species. We would have died out long ago. We never would have started, actually. We never would have became a species if we didn't have dopamine reward system. Now, drugs and alcohol. Drugs are man-made, and they give a false spike in dopamine. Let's say the highest dopamine, natural high dopamine, or the natural spike that your receptors can transmit is or receive, or the maximum is, say, 100 for sex or a ribeye steak or something. Crystal meth gives 9 times more. So let's say there's 100 units of dopamine in your brain spiked or received, or whatever the level is. I don't know much about the brain, but Nora Volkow explains it better. You can find her on YouTube, Nora Volkow. She's the head of the whole thing up there in the United States. Got a couple $1 billion budget. But anyway, there's dopamine that increases in our brain when we do all these natural things. So the maximum, say, is 100. This is 100%, 100 units. They call it 100 units of dopamine. It's not, but crystal meth is 900 units of dopamine. Alcohol is 400 units of dopamine. Crystal meth is 900. Cocaine's like 700, I think it was. Alcohol's 400. There's a lot given off by opiates. I don't know the number, but I think crystal meth and cocaine are the highest. Anyway, so what happens is it uses up all the dopamine. It messes with the reward system. Drugs and alcohol are not natural. You put it in a natural brain created by God. You put a man-made thing in there, just like anything man-made. You ever notice things that are not good for you are man-made? Gambling, pornography's man-made. Sugar and flour, man-made. Alcohol, drugs, everything that's really bad for you is man-made. Everything that's good for you, like broccoli, man, you gotta have some broccoli. You got one ingredient. Man never touched it. The things that are great for you, avocados and tomatoes, and even chicken, right? like, and meat, like as long as it's not been touched by man, like natural, free range. It's all good for you. Everything from God that has one ingredient, because man never touched it if it's got one ingredient, an orange, an apple that comes from a tree that hasn't been sprayed, a pesticide, is good for you. Okay? Is good for you. And everything bad for you, like sprayed vegetables or stuff, or sugar, flour, anything really bad for you it's been products, God-given, but like sugar cane and stuff, but man touched it and we processed it. Or we did something with it, like crystal meth comes from what? Like, the earth somewhere, heroin comes from poppies, right? And stuff like that, I think, right? But man messed with it and it became real bad for us. Also, they messed with drugs and alcohol. And with that, they found out in the 1990s that there's a spike given off when you start using drugs and alcohol. Remember the time when it worked, when alcohol and drugs worked? There's a spike given off. Dopamine spike, high. When you get addicted to that, you end up wanting heroin. People relate to this. You end up wanting heroin more than you want sex. You end up wanting heroin more than you want food, because the dopamine reward system is giving you more reward from the dopamine reward system than a steak or sex ever would. And then what happens? The drugs and alcohol reset the whole dopamine reward system. It gets lower and lower and lower and depleted to the point where you take away the drugs and alcohol, there's no dopamine at all, natural or not, because drug and alcohol reset that whole system and damaged the receptors, and now we're not getting any dopamine unless only a little bit from doing drugs and alcohol. So we're no longer using drugs and alcohol to get high or enjoy life, or drinking because life is good, conviviality, companionship, colorful imagination. We are now drinking and using just to feel somewhat normal. So people say, why does he keep doing it? He doesn't even enjoy it anymore. I don't enjoy it anymore, but you take it away and I'm really suffering. I just was drinking just to get a few moments, just to be able to have a couple of moments to be able to watch. I couldn't even watch Netflix if I wasn't drinking. It came like that to the end. I didn't feel human unless I had some alcohol. Alcohol was the only normal life. It became the only normal life. You take away the drugs and alcohol, I did not feel normal. I was not comfortable in my own skin. So what do? We stop drinking and using. We have no dopamine. Like I just said to you earlier. We go into an AA meeting and we get a little increase in dopamine because we're socializing. Yeah, we're socializing. Get a little hungry, you go up there, get a donut and a coffee, right? Caffeine and sugar. Get a little dopamine. Nothing wrong with a little sugar. It's not going to kill you. A lot of sugar, okay, but get a little dopamine. Talk to each other. Maybe see a girl. You don't have to have sex or intercourse to get dopamine. You can see the opposite sex, and dopamine will rise, because not only in a hamburger, you can see a hamburger and you'll get a dopamine rise, because not only do we get dopamine when we do it or eat it or have it, we get a dopamine rise when we see it. It motivates us to go get it. So if you're in a meeting and there's pretty girls there or something, you're going to get a dopamine rise. If you're in a meeting and you're socializing with each other, you're going to get a dopamine rise from the social instincts, a dopamine rise from the sex instincts, and then you're going to get a rise from the security instincts, which is food, shelter and food, and you'll get that from sugar and coffee. Now, that's not the solution. That's just to get somewhat feeling normal so you can get through the meeting and get yourself dried up and get yourself, rid of drugs, and find out people that are staying sober and talk to them. And there's a miracle. When one alcoholic talks to another, they don't feel like drinking. Something to do with dopamine. And that's what happened when Bill and Bob got together and they related to each other. They got dopamine rises, I guess, and serotonin and stuff, and they started relating to each other. Their social instincts were taken off, their food a little bit, no sex instincts, just a whole lot of social instincts. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about. It's a whole bunch of men and women getting together to recover, get a little rise in dopamine, get a lot of rise in dopamine after a while, and the meetings work, man. The meetings work as long as we're relating to each other and talking about spiritual principles or what the problem is. And socializing works and food works. So we're getting off the drugs and alcohol. We're going back to the normal life. Why would we want to go back to the normal life? Because we're getting 900 units from dopamine. We're not anymore. We're only getting like 10 or 20. Drugs and alcohol stopped working, but what am I going to do? Am I supposed to be going around wanting to kill myself? So that's it. Hopefully everybody understands that. It's a great video on YouTube, Norvocal. I got 8 seconds left. Love you all. That's my little video. I'm going to do a live one after this. Tune in tomorrow. Love y'all.